what's got to be the biggest event of the year so far, and that includes CES, and CES was pretty massive. That is Microsoft's Windows 10 event that included a lot of stuff that we were kind of expecting, and then one big thing we were not, the HoloLens and Windows holographics. So here to talk about all of this stuff, I'm Christina Warren, I'm Mashable Senior Tech Analyst, and I am joined tonight talking about this with Pete Patchell, our our tech editor.
Hello.
Hey, Pete. Chris Taylor in San Francisco, our deputy editor. What's up, Chris?
Hey.
And our main man on location, our hero in arms, Lance Ulanoff, our chief tech correspondent. Lance, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Are you
a
not
little exhausted?
Not at this point?
Am I what?
You just finished the HoloLens. Are you sure you're back in reality right now? We could all be holograms.
We
could all be holograms.
Yeah, what level of inception are we at right now?
The top is still spinning.
Perfect. So, obviously we want to talk a lot about the HoloLens and about Windows Holographic and all of this amazing stuff. But before we kind of get into all of that, let's just kind of do a rundown of the event. And Lance, I'd love to start with you. This is the second event that Microsoft has had for Windows 10. They had the first event in the fall in October, and this is that introduced the beta for developers, kind of the tech preview. Now they're going to be having the Windows consumer preview, and they're showing off more features, including Cortana on the desktop, a new web browser, and a bunch of other things. Tell us a little bit about the event itself, and maybe if you could compare or contrast it to some of Microsoft's other events in the last year, or even some other tech events we've seen from companies like Google and Microsoft. Google and Apple.
It was a fairly intimate event. There was probably about 100 journalists in the room. It was, it didn't feel, obviously Apple events have this weird sort of tension to them because, I don't know, it's just something about the way Apple runs it. It can feel very tight until they make the big announcement. And, it took a little while to get interesting because they were kind of talking about what had happened, the run-up to all of this. And then they finally got going, and, it was a lot of what we expected, with the Windows stuff, especially the Cortana integration and the big reveal of Spartan, although the amount of information we got about that browser is truly Spartan, because we didn't even see demos after seeing it that first time. It was not on any of the systems in the demo room, and in fact, what was made clear during the event is that that new browser will come after this next build, and the next build is due, I believe, next week. I am a little surprised because it doesn't sound as if they are making it available beyond the Insider program. It's not that hard to sign up for the Insider program, but it does limit it, so this is not the build where they say, hey, all consumers download this now. At the same time, they made it super clear that there's going to be this 1 year period when Windows 10 does come out that they're going to try and really drag the entire Windows world along with them, by giving free upgrades for anybody running 8.1, 8, and Windows 7 will be able to upgrade for free. So that's a pretty cool and big deal. And then, of course, Cortana, which I did get to try out numerous times on a number of Windows 10 desktops, and even in challenging environments, and I was in a bunch of challenging environments, it did understand me, it did respond, I could talk to it, or I could type with it, so that was pretty cool. There was so much, and then, just so you know, after, there were two things that you didn't see in the stream. After the stream ended, they did a Q&A, where Satya and Meyerson talked about, answered some questions, and then we went through a whole series of demos that have lasted up until really just minutes ago.
Great. So, Pete, I'll go to you. What did you think of the event, and was there anything you were surprised about? I mean, other than the Holo stuff, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. What was kind of your general take, I guess, from the event, from how Microsoft put it together, and do you think this was enough to really get people excited about Windows 10?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like you touched on it, that the What surprised me most was kind of the feel that this didn't feel like a Microsoft event. There were little bits here and there, I suppose, with the annotation in Spartan and little bits on Xbox that were, oh, that's interesting. But just the whole feel of this was like, this is like an Apple event. This is very much like, okay, we haven't quite seen this from Microsoft. I haven't in a long, long time. I'd have to really think about if I've ever seen the entirety of their consumer-facing stuff all at once, and sort of with more unity, you would think. And they've basically succeeded in that message of Windows 10. That we've been hearing about Windows 10 is going to unify all this stuff. It's going to fulfill some promises of Windows 8. It's going to bring Xbox into the fold. It's going to also be forward-looking. And looking at all the boxes there, they really checked them off on this one. And it really felt like this is like, oh wow, so this is Microsoft. Like, I mean, I get it in a more consumer way. I mean, they've always had the enterprise stuff, and they teased last year, and then their old server business and stuff is still everyone sort of associates with Microsoft. But this is the most sort of practical vision of Satya Nadella's Microsoft that the public will see, I think. And so that was kind of surprising that they pulled that off. That it really felt like, okay, we'll see how some of these pan out, particularly HoloLens and Windows Holographic, but they're really serious about, like, we will be relevant in conversations, and we're bearing our entire company's efforts to do so. So that kind of surprised me that they kind of pulled that off, at least in the on-paper sense now. And again, in the coming months, we'll see how it works in practice.
Chris, to that same point, to Pete's point, do you feel like, from a company perspective, I know you're working on something right now about what these announcements mean for Microsoft as a company. Do you feel like they did enough today to really kind of help kind of reset their relevancy, in Pete's term? And what do you think that, I guess what was your take on the event, just kind of a high level?
Well, I think Pete is right to say that that they were obviously aiming for a more Apple-style event. I think the way in which it still felt like a Microsoft event was it was 2 hours and 19 minutes long.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
you really feel like you could have chopped about an hour out of that presentation, and it would not have suffered one bit. Reduce some of the jargon. This is still a company that's run by its MBAs more than its designers, more than its engineers, and Satya is certainly trying to turn the boat around on that. But it's this is an ocean liner that he is trying to turn around. He did say something interesting that I wanted to touch on, the perhaps we could talk about a little bit more, and that I'm going to deal with in this piece. And this is a direct quote. He said, "We have bigger hopes, higher aspirations for Windows. We want to move from people needing Windows to choosing Windows to loving Windows."
That's a massive statement, I think that's huge for two reasons, right? Like, one, it's acknowledging that right now people don't choose Windows and they don't love it. To wanting to go into that desire place. That's a really interesting admission, don't you guys think, that they're acknowledging that people don't love Windows? They're kind of forced with it?
My fear about that is that it's sort of, it's a little like the Amazon.love memo,
Right.
which we remember from Jeff Bezos, in which he really wanted people to love Amazon the way that they love Apple and Nike and Disney, and that led in many ways to the Fire Phone, and the dynamic perspective, this perfectly useless piece of technology that has 4 cameras on either side of the phone. And loving Windows. Well, maybe some of us do, but also the fact that the Windows announcement was immediately overshadowed by all of this HoloLens stuff suggests that Microsoft really has a long way to go there.
But I know Lance is chomping at the bit to respond.
Yeah.
Respond, Lance.
I mean, I think that first of all, what they. It's not that I didn't get the sense that Microsoft is hoping to make you fall in love with Windows by sort of just wooing you in some sort of esoteric sense. It's much more practical than that. That they can make people love Windows by dint of the features and the capabilities and the utility that it brings through this unified system. So that was kind of the point that they were hitting over and over again, that sort of it's a one world approach where something you start here with Cortana appears over here. Your gaming can finally traverse these different platforms. That it's a system that recognizes the different form factors. This is really always what you want. You want a subsystem that is unified and an interface that is consistent, but then makes critical allowances for the device that you're using. For example, Continuum is now this one button thing where you can switch from standard desktop mode to touch mode or tablet mode. It's not perfectly carried out by any stretch, but it's pretty powerful. I also think that anyone who had introduced HoloLens would have had the same reaction, because there's no way of getting around this kind of whiz-bang thing. I think that what was interesting is that that they did it at all, because I think they said, this is what we're doing with Windows. This is what's really practical. But you guys came for a show. Well, we're going to give you a show. This is our one more thing. Microsoft finally has something to pull out of its back pocket that's going to knock your socks off, and that's not really very much like Microsoft, because everything tends to be on that flat plane. But I do, I think that it's just, it's a little unfair to say that they sort of just are wishing and hoping that people love Windows. The reason people don't love Windows is that they have to use it out of necessity. But if you see features in a platform that you truly desire, then you use it because you want to. And obviously that's the transition that they're hoping to make.
Definitely. So it's kind of to that point a little bit, Pete. When I ask you, Lance is talking about how they're kind of taking these moonshots, making these big statements. And to me, although the obvious comparison people want to make is Apple, to me this really seemed like a shot of the bow at Google to kind of be like, oh, you think Google's the only ones who can jump out of airplanes and show whiz-bang stuff. Let's show you what we've been working on. Let's see what our moonshots are. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's kind of a coincidence that Google Glass sort of didn't quite go away, but in its current form has gone away at the same time as this has emerged. It is definitely trying to be Google in the sense that Microsoft is not necessarily that we're doing a virtual reality headset, but that, hey, we can be big, forward-thinking, and goofy in the same way. I mean, not goofy, actually. I think they're trying to do it in the non-goofy way. You know what I mean? I sort of said goofy earlier today, but I realized, they're kind of like, we're going to be big and bold and a little bit fun, but a little more considered about all of it.
They're taking risks.
Yeah, it's risky, but it's not kind of like, college kid goofy the way
right.
is, I mean, kind of. And whereas this is like, they came out and showed, okay, here you have the motorcycle, you have Skype over here, you have these experiences that, to borrow the BlackBerry playbook phrase, playtime's over, which well, but I mean,
they should not use that.
Well, they didn't use it to their credit.
No, they did not. Just in case Microsoft's watching, they should not use that.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I'm saying is that it's good that they the playbook said that and didn't deliver, whereas this is, at least in the demo, it's delivering without saying it. You know what I mean? And so they're kind of like, this is our thrust with this thing. So I mean, yeah, there's that Google as you said, there's this moonshot idea that Microsoft. I mean, they've always had Microsoft research. They've always been kind of dabbling in stuff.
Yeah.
But they've never shown it off this way before. I mean, I can't remember a time they've ever shown anything like this at a consumer kind of focused event like this. Not in a lab, not kind of a future-proof presentation, not as a proof of concept, but as like a product.
I also don't mean to compare Microsoft research directly to Google X, which those are sort of different things. But I mean. I don't think Satya Nadella wants to compete directly with Google X on all the self-driving cars and whatever. But it is, they're like, we can do that too. We are a big successful company. We have great engineers. We have a long history and a big footprint out there. There's no reason we can't. And, you know, I feel like people at Microsoft under Nadella are now sort of drinking that Kool-Aid, you know, a few more cups of it, and really.
Well, one thing that I want to make clear that I see is a real difference between the kind of moonshots that Google does and what Microsoft has done here is that Google S is a good example of Google introducing something that is almost entirely disconnected from everything else they do. You know, wasn't using the same sort of, you know, it's not Android Wear, it's, you know, it's a different operating system. It had, you know, people had to build specialized apps for it, and it was just, it didn't really, there wasn't really so much a signature Google thing. Like you didn't see how, oh yeah, I see how they got here. But I have to say with HoloLens, what'll become quite clear is how they've been working on this all along in various pieces. And it's a kind of bringing together of all of those things. And in a way that ends up being a lot more polished than what you might see coming out of a lab where it really is a moonshot.
One thing I'm going to call them out on right now, though, is that I think it was Kipman who said, you know, oh, well, how do you build apps? Well, you can do universal Windows apps, and you can just put them on. And I'm like, I suspect it's going to be a little more complicated than just adding a few lines of code and suddenly your app.
Absolutely.
Now, that said, there's probably a very ultra-simplified way to render it on the headset so it just looks like a screen. But if we're talking those complex interactions with actual holograms that appear on physical objects, I'm pretty sure that's going to take a pretty extensive development to do that.
I'm kind of chomping at the bit to talk more deeply about HoloLens, but I know there are other things, you know, like in particular Windows Phone 10 that we could talk about.
Right. We got to talk about a couple other things real quick, but just you know, to reiterate what Pete said, I totally agree with you, Pete. I think that Microsoft for years has been pushing this one Windows vision, the fact you can build these universal apps. The fact of the matter is that hasn't happened, that hasn't taken off. And even though I think it'll definitely be possible, and certainly I think you could argue easier for people to make apps, you know, HoloLens and Windows holographic friendly than maybe, you know, would be to build kind of an Android app to kind of be part of, you know, Google Glass. The idea that anybody can just do this with a, you know, swipe of a button. I mean, that's the same line of manure that Java's been, you know, giving us the last 20 years. You know, write once, run anywhere. It's just not reality. But putting that aside, that little bit of cynicism aside, I wanted to go to you real quick, I guess, Lance and Pete, and just maybe let's just get a couple of highball features of some of the things. We've got Michael Brown in the chat asked, you know, what changes will be added in Windows 10, you know, over Windows 8. So, you know, just for people who haven't been following along, as well as some of the new things we learned today, what are some of the big, you know, breakout features with Windows 10, and after we have this discussion, then we will get to HoloLens and Windows holographic. I promise, because that's, I know, what we all just really want to talk about. So, Pete, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I like the, you know, Continuum. We learned a little bit more about that. We knew that was going to be their way to do multimodal better than Windows 8. I would just add, I'm looking forward to stuff, especially from Lance's hands-on. I've already seen a couple of his videos. Looks great. I would add, it's more than just tablet and keyboard, and I hope they've considered this. Like, it's like tablet, keyboard, and external monitor, tablet, keyboard, and, you know, other external things, and you might want subtly different experiences for all of these different modes. So I hope that is part of Continuum in the final product. But that's cool. I love that Cortana is in everything.
Yeah.
And while there is a lot of people will think there's a creep factor here, it's going to be predicting, but this is the vision of context computing. You know, it's like you need some kind of intelligent cloud-based thing that is watching your every move, and as creepy as that sounds, it's actually good for you. I mean, it's going to do things like they showed the Delta flight thing in the browser, so it knows you're tracking a flight, and as soon as you start typing, like this predictive intelligence, this is how we get to cool things like the HoloLens doing really amazing anticipatory things. It's built into Cortana. And I hope Cortana sort of also takes into account Continuum, so multimodal stuff becomes a bit more personal. Maybe the way I want to interact with my Surface Pro is different from the way Lance does. You know, that kind of thing. And the last thing I would say I'm excited about is Spartan, and just the sharing of content, the quick drawing, That was very cool. But again, having Cortana there, predicting sort of, taking my web history and not just giving me better stuff on the web, giving me better stuff everywhere. Very excited about all that.
Lance, any things, commentary you want to add based on your experiences with the new build that'll be coming out next week?
So a couple other things that we haven't really mentioned. Photos gets a significant update, which I thought was interesting because I remember, Apple has done a significant update of Photos with their mobile system, and Photos gets updated across the platforms for Microsoft with Windows 10. And there's actually some cool stuff I saw today with the camera. That will appear, that is with, your Lumia maybe, but also some of those features will even go to the camera that's built into your Windows 10 system, and some pretty powerful stuff, a lot of burst mode stuff. They have this one thing where with every photo you capture, they're going to capture a little bit of video. So you're going to have these sort of live photos. I mean, there's a lot of intelligence they're building in there, and there's also organizational stuff. They're going to help you organize your photos. They're going to help you manage your photos, in OneDrive and local, and auto enhance them, which sounds very Google-esque, which of course you can always undo. Maps is going to be Maps in particular, where I think you'll notice some of the biggest changes is Maps on Windows Phone, although this will definitely carry through to tablets and of course desktop. But Microsoft Windows 10 Maps is going to be a combination of Bing and Nokia here. So the best of those is going to be slammed together to be one comprehensive app, including, by the way, Transit. Transit will be in there from the get-go, which is, yeah, exactly. Us city dwellers.
It's ridiculous that Apple bought two transit app companies and hasn't integrated it yet. So I'm glad that Microsoft is doing that on their end. That's very smart.
Yeah, Lance leaves Spartan, but Spartan is only important because of what it signifies for the company. The fact that that a browser that does not sound like it's going to be Internet Explorer is going to be in these systems. I don't even know what that really means. Is this Microsoft giving up? Is this Microsoft saying that the only way we can beat Chrome is by starting over or starting with a new brand? Because I have to say, they didn't show enough of the browser for me to get excited about it. They didn't show, for example, graphics performance, which is always such a big deal. And so I feel like while it was something we knew it was coming, we don't really know much more than we did before the event. And it is something that they are really still working on. They will not be ready with it for this build. It's coming months from now. But I think it's something to watch. It's very important that it's happening. I just can't really weigh in on what it really is.
No, I fully agree with you on that. I mean, that was probably the most disappointing aspect of the presentation to me, was that it was great that they announced Spartan, but the fact they barely showed it off, they didn't show any performance demos, and they, didn't give any details. They said it's a new rendering engine, but they didn't say what the new engine is. They didn't talk anything about, whether it'll accept, prefixes that people use for WebKit and Blink or any of that. It was very sparse and Spartan, to make a pun. It
has Cortana.
Yeah, exactly. It's Cortana, and it has
start using it.
It has Cortana. It has Sketch built in, basically.
Right.
So Chris Taylor, I know that like most of us here at Mashable, you are a Mac user, and you've been a Mac user for quite some time. Was there anything that you saw in the Windows 10 presentation that would kind of make you want to check this out, especially since it's going to be a free upgrade for the first year for Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 8.1 users?
Well, just on the browser front, like everyone, I was disappointed that we didn't hear more about Spartan. I was hoping that it would be a contender, or maybe it will be. I mean, from a consumer perspective, what we need, the only way you can compete with a new browser in this day and age is to have it be faster, lighter, and compatible with everything. I mean, I'm an Apple user, but I'm also a reluctant Chrome user.
Yep, same.
And Chrome is just the best of a bad bunch, and I think we all sort of feel the same way about it. We know that even Chrome is bloated. It's just less bloated than Firefox. more compatible with everything than Safari. So there is actually a huge amount of possibility in that space, and I could fully see myself using Spartan on a Mac, in a year's time if it can demonstrate those three things: faster, lighter, more compatible. Would anything tempt me to use Windows 10? I have to say, at this stage, probably not. Maybe I'm too old, too set in my ways. Maybe I just love Yosemite too much to switch over. But yeah, I think it's interesting how much they talked about Windows 10 sort of inserting itself into your life, whereas it seems, again, this sort of a piece with the Spartan discussion. It seems that the goal for an operating system these days is to get out of your way,
Yes.
to not exist. You barely even notice it. That's for me the great thing about OS 10 and Yosemite and all of that.
But Chris, if it's in your pocket, which the idea with Windows 10 is that Windows 10 is in your pocket on your phone, and it's your constant companion. There's all these things you're doing with it. It knows a lot about your life. You want that to sort of carry over onto the desktop. You want that to carry over onto the tablet. I mean, it's exactly what Apple's trying to do, and I think that's really the intention here. That you don't want it to be in your face, but you want it to be super smart and aware, and offer tremendous utility by the things that it can glean from your daily activities. And it can only do that if this whole system is tied together, which is really, I think, the direction we're going.
It's a great vision. I think in practice you get stuff like live tiles, and I've tried Windows 8 phones. I've tried the live tile system on the Surface. It just, for me, it always gets in the way. It's like it's trying to induce ADD. There is too much information.
Just a programming note for me, because I hope we get to talk about HoloLens. I'm concerned I may get kicked out of Microsoft's campus.
We're moving to HoloLens right now.
Yeah, because people are, like, the people who work here are leaving.
Cool. Well, we're gonna shift. We're gonna shift.
As soon as they do.
Yeah, we're gonna shift over to HoloLens right now. So Lance, you're the one who's used it. It's obviously it's Microsoft's new augmented reality headset, and it goes along with the new platform. Tell us about HoloLens and tell us what it's like inside Inception, and tell us all about it.
So first of all, one of the things you should know is that when I listened to Satya talk about this and Meyerson talk about this, I was struck by the consistent use of the term hologram and holographic. I do understand what a hologram is, and I know that it uses lasers to produce an image that floats in space, and I asked Satya about that. But Satya was quite clear in that he saw holograms and augmented reality as sort of part of the same idea, in that they both marry the real and the virtual world. So by that, if you consider it that way, I think he's actually right. Now, that said, going into the demo, I still didn't have high expectations, just because I've seen great demos and then I've had the experience and I go, meh, it's obviously it's a work in progress. I can say, quite honestly, this wasn't that. Now, we were not allowed to have our cameras, our phones. I was taking notes on pen and paper. Okay? So I had to really sort of nothing. So I was really, this is, all from memory in the notes that I could take. But there were a number of experiences. I'll try and give you the highlights and explain a little bit about what they had us wear. So the device that you saw during the demo was a prototype at the sort of the leading edge of development. So it looked good, had the clean sort of slate gray exterior. The one we wore looked like it had its skin ripped off. It was like a Frankenstein monster. It had to be placed very carefully on our heads. We couldn't touch the front of it because all the wiring was exposed. It had a pack that sat on the front of your body where the holographic processing unit sits. And, comfort level was, they positioned on your head. By the way, they measured the distance between my pupils by hand, but that will eventually happen automatically. And then they moved the things to sort of adjust that. And I did wear my glasses, thank goodness. They put it on your head, they clamp it on tight enough that It was a little uncomfortable, and left. We were all walking around with big red marks on our head.
A lot of trust you put into Microsoft in these demos.
I really did. I'm glad they didn't drill anything into my skull.
I was gonna say they were doing some experiments. So at a high level, we want to hear more about your experiences, but somebody in the chat wanted to know kind of like what's the difference between, I guess from an experience level, between this and Google Glass,
Okay.
since you use both. Yeah.
Quite different. So Google Glass is basically one piece of it's a crystal with a mirror, and it sort of shoots a display there that you look through, but what you see is kind of like floating in front of you, a 25-inch display, and you only see through one eye. It does not recognize anything around it. It's basically a flat display. You look around. Okay. Now there's a slight similarity because you have a visor and you have see-through displays. What that means is that it allows you to still see what's in front of you, what's below you. Like, you're not closed off, and you're not intended to be closed off. And this is actually really important, and you'll understand as I continue to explain. Now, the other thing it does, and this is what I was talking about with Microsoft working on this all along, this combines a bunch of their technologies. I don't know if anybody remembers, I wrote about something called Beamatron a long time ago, and they've actually called it other things. In this headset, in addition to a bunch of cameras, there is the 3D imaging technology that you find in a Kinect device. What that does is it does a 3D map of the environment around in front of you. So the images that you see through this display are mapped to your environment in a way that can be quite remarkable. So it really turns it into a much more immersive, in a way, experience, but it's completely intelligent about the environment as well. To see, I'll have to give you this example just so you can understand. I was wearing the visor, and at one point, this is during the Mars Curiosity experience, they had me stand in front of a computer screen. So the standard computer had a mouse. The environment when I was looking, before I looked at the computer screen, was covered with Mars. It was a 3D rendered Mars that you looked around, you could see rocks, but when I looked at the computer, it was cut out. It was completely cut out. Like, I didn't see, it wasn't one overlay on top of another. It knew the computer was there. It knew how to cut around it. So I could look at the computer and work with it. So now I have this blended environment, a blended environment I've never worked in before. And it gets a little bit crazier, because she's like, oh, so on the computer, could you click on the rock you want to highlight? And then I noticed after I clicked on it in a photo of, like a sort of flat photo of the environment, in the 3D rendered photo, or the mapped version, the same rock was highlighted. She's like, oh, what if you could take your mouse and just go off the screen? I'm like, what do you mean? And I did it. The mouse went from this computer screen onto the virtual environment without hiccuping or anything. It just extended, and I was suddenly mousing around the virtual world. It's so hard to describe because it was so insane. Pretty much the entire experience of using HoloLens is kind of insane, because for as much as the device itself at this development stage looks like a Frankenstein monster, the experience is unbelievably polished, much more so than anything else I've ever used quite like that. And I prefer it much more to the environments like Oculus and even Google's Samsung Gear VR and Google Cardboard that tend to envelop you in the VR experience but cut you off from the outside world. This pulls in the outside world and maps it together with the VR environment.
So Lance, are you saying that there's no sense of nausea,
not even a little bit. No, not even a little bit. I put it on. I stood up. The first experience, which is a project with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory from NASA, was how scientists could engage with Curiosity and its research better. And basically all the photos, all the imagery from Curiosity was in this 3D environment. Not a rendering of it, but the photos, but they were given texture. They were given a map, sort of like a relief map, but they were all looked real. I could stand in front of the rover which, by the way, is the size of a car, and you only get that sense when you're standing in front of a virtual version of it. I could lean down and get close to rocks that were on the ground. Oh, and by the way, this thing where you do this and then you do this, that's basically your sort of select and control. That's it. And I got that in 2 seconds.
Wow. Be careful when you show us right click.
That's the other thing. No, but it worked.
So we got a question. This is an interesting question from the chat, which is basically, do you know if you could use this outdoors? I mean, obviously they showed it indoors, but because it's self-powered, did you ask Microsoft if this is something that needs internet access to run and to do its computing, or could you use this like outside on the street?
Well, one of the things they said during the event is that you won't need a phone, you won't need a computer, and you won't need an external power source. But in my environment, I was tethered because the power was still external. So I don't know, but if you are making choices that relate to a database somewhere in the cloud, then I think you are connected to the internet. I think that's going to be the sort of the more obvious use case scenario. But I'm not certain. And they didn't tell us that. They didn't tell us price. They didn't tell us availability. So there's a lot of questions still.
But all in all, I mean, as Frankenstein as this was, the demo experience was. It sounds like it blew you away.
Well, the other thing that we did was I conducted a Skype conversation, a Skype call, and this woman guided me through changing a switch, a light switch on a wall. And
oh,
she
that's
did
awesome.
this, like I would see her floating in the screen. I could pin her if I wanted to have her out of the way, but I could look up and see her. And then she would draw on my screen in front of me and say, pick up this, then she'd draw an arrow there. Then she'd say, and she could see everything I could see. She'd say, turn that around, put that there. So there was real utility in that.
It's Mayday, but like useful.
Right. Much more engaging, and I've changed a light switch before, so it wasn't like it was rocket science to me, but I thought it was a very effective way of showing off the experience. I mean, those were the two most memorable experiences that I had with it, without a doubt. Oh, I'm sorry, and Minecraft was also very cool.
Minecraft was cool. So yeah, I was going to say that they spent $2 billion on Minecraft, and now we can play it in our living rooms. Instead of playing with real Legos, we can play with virtual Legos.
Yeah,
Which I think makes sense.
You can't blow up for real Legos, but you can blow up blocks in Minecraft.
This is true. Chris and Pete, before Lance has to leave us, do you guys have any questions for him about HoloLens and Windows Holographic?
You go, Chris, man.
My only question is when can I get my hands on one? I mean, I'm really just shocked that they didn't make this a separate event. Did you talk to them about that, Lance, about the sort of the optics of this, of how they rolled it out, about why they chose to just make it a one more thing? Because I mean, the comparison here a lot of people made is the iPhone, but that was, they devoted a whole event to the iPhone. They rolled it out straight away. And then, they said this is coming out 6 months from now. So
Microsoft has struggled with this. They've struggled with messaging, pre-messaging their events. We've been disappointed, so then we hesitate to sort of believe that something's going to be big. I got a little hint before the event that something might be coming, but I couldn't quite wrap my mind around what it would be. And I just didn't have great expectations. I kind of thought it would be like what other people are doing. And ultimately, this really isn't like what other people are doing. This is Microsoft's vision for blended computing, virtual and real. And I think that's really important, that not only did they do something that's big and exciting, they did something it's in Microsoft's own way. But I think it's smart. I think that this is the first time they got it right, that they knew they were going to have a lot of eyes on them for this. And because people are, in fact, interested in Windows, the consumer side of Windows, because 1.5 billion people are using it. And I think that they finally managed to pull the trigger properly. So will they be able to do that again? Did they learn enough from this to sort of say, we've got a formula? who knows? But I give them great credit for finally giving us a really memorable day.
I thought it was pretty actually genius to do it as a one more thing than having its own event. And I think it goes back to kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, because if it was purely about Windows 10 and bringing Xbox in and the browser and all this stuff and Cortana, I mean, it's all stuff we've either heard rumored, leaked, or speculated about. So that's all fine. But also, like, the message on Windows 10 up till now, I think a lot of it has been just fixing what was wrong with Windows 8, the problems that created. And, it's kind of like the Windows 7. Whereas if you add this into it, this vision of future computing, it adds the strong forward-looking angle here. It's that, we're fixing all this stuff, and we're also making bold moves, taking a leap forward. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Even if it does make, its first new browser in 20 years, 16 news. It's like, it makes some sense to me. I mean, it definitely surprised us, and tech people, with all the leaking going out all the time. I mean, we're hard to surprise. So, I give them, I understand the thought here. Also, it's not like it's it is an existing category, but it's still so nascent, and it's like, it's so risky. Like, when the iPhone came out, it was so clear that, oh yeah, this is it. What we want to do. This is impressive. Isn't it what we want to do? And that's the only sort of cold water I'd throw on this, which ties back to the app thing, the app angle we had sort of briefly mentioned before. It sounds amazing how many developers, how many experiences, short of a NASA and certain enterprise people, like how is this going to manifest itself for me?
Right.
Well, I would say that I can see from where I stand a lot of consumer and enterprise utility in this device. I really can. But I think the thing to keep in mind here is why this was so smart and why this is so powerful is that people will continue talking about HoloLens for probably weeks to come. Microsoft hasn't had that in a while. They've had events, and people have kind of finished up talking about them within a few hours. They've kind of, like, okay, that's what Microsoft's doing. But here, this is like the great unknown. They can't quite comprehend what's just happened here, and they can't quite comprehend this product, and they are fascinated by it, and they want to know more. Speaking of which, a lot of what I've said here, I'm going to do my best to put my experiences down in writing so people can kind of understand what HoloLens is all about. I wish I had photos to show. I wish I had video to show, but I will include anything I can. But definitely for people who want to understand it, I'm going to do my best.
Awesome. Well, we will be talking more about HoloLens. In fact, we might even try to do a HoloLens exclusive hangout later this week, on Friday or something. Maybe we can do something like that if there's enough interest from the community. But right now, I know Lance has to get out of Redmond because Microsoft's kicking him out of the office, and it's getting late here in New York too. So I just want to go around the table and get kind of final thoughts, what you guys think of this event. I personally, I tend to agree with Pete. I think that by making this big surprise announcement at the end has kind of, and to Lance's point too, we're going to be talking about Microsoft, and we're going to be talking about a Microsoft event potentially weeks after it happened, which is something that just hasn't happened in years, and it kind of took away from the idea that Windows 10 is just fixing everything they effed up earlier, and taking the conversation into a more positive, wow, they can actually take these moonshots on. So I think that's really interesting. Chris, I'd love to hear your final thoughts, just kind of what you thought of the event, and what do you Microsoft, is Satya really bringing in a new Microsoft? This feels new to me.
It does feel new, and that's entirely because of HoloLens. Really, it blew everything else away. It made the 2 hours and 19 minutes worth it. The video, I mean, to Pete's point, I think there was immediately obvious utility in the Skype integration, in the notion that you can have your handyman help you change a light switch or fix a sink, I think was the example that they had in the video. I totally need that. I could name a dozen people off the top of my head who need that. we have a whole generation that is not quite as handy as it should be, and this is the kind of thing that that would help them. And I think the interesting thing is to contrast it with how Google rolled out Glass. Google totally focused on how the thing looked,
Yeah.
and they stuck it on fashion models, and they sent those pictures around. And here, I mean, I don't even think that there was a single shot in that video of these goofy-looking, big goggles from the front for obvious reasons, because they're
Right.
goofy-looking
Because they look
big
terrible.
goggles. But it doesn't matter. If those goofy-looking big goggles can help me play Minecraft in the living room, or Skype with a guy who's going to help me fix my stove, or whatever, I can totally see how I'm going to use that, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. So
Exactly. You're not expected to wear it all the time. It's just for certain circumstances, and maybe eventually we'll want to wear it all the time, but it's not as if it's supposed to become part of your permanent face and identity. I totally agree. Pete, go to you next. We'll finish up with Lance. Kind of big takeaways from the event and everything Microsoft announced today, because there's a ton of stuff, and I know that we've got tons of things to ruminate on.
To sort of respond to Chris, yeah, I sort of see that. Minecraft in the living room could be the killer app. I don't think home repair is going to be the killer app. And also, it's been sort of like, okay, I could fix my outlet or my sink or whatever, but it's like, does my handyman have the app to do this? Does he, like, what is he doing? Like, what, and will people make a big investment to be HoloLens compatible if you're not NASA? The iPhone was made, I mean, it got to 1 million apps, but by 99-cent one-offs mainly, and doing all this kind of like really quick, very digestible stuff. HoloLens looks at, in terms of the heavy lift for developers and even people buying it. I'm sure this isn't going to be a $499 Windows PC. It's going to be. It seems like it's at the opposite end of the spectrum. So that's sort of my skepticism. As excited as I am as well to try it out, I want this.
You're such a buzzkill, Patchell. You're such a buzzkill. But no, I think you're right to actually bring up those points. I think those are really valid. But just from the event overall, do you have any takeaways?
Last layer was a light lift. It was a quick interaction with Twitter. All you had to do was throw something in. I'm sure you'll be able to build apps for that, but that immersive stuff, I mean, that's going to take some lift. But it's a bold vision of the future, and way more than Steve Ballmer ever did. Satya Nadella, and let's give some credit here, because this clearly was a project that started under Ballmer. I mean,
yes,
this has been a
it's been going for 5 years. Yeah.
So but in terms of Nadella and his vision and how this fits into it, I get it. Like, this event to me, like, I get it more than, like, I had I visited Redmond campus last fall, had a chance to talk to Nadella, and he laid out, verbally mostly, his vision of the company and the strategy, and it all sounded all right. This is pretty good. There's data, and there's capitalizing on their footprint in the enterprise, but still doing consumery stuff, and it all kind of was like, okay. And now it's like, this was the show, and as sort of Lance put in, it's like, yes, okay, yeah, I get how all this stuff comes together now, and Windows 10 cannot come fast enough. I mean, we're done with Windows 8, 8.1. Yes, those had some good aspects to them. They were also
they didn't.
in their own way, but they were a mistake. Sorry, Steven Sinofsky. They
great guy, but no.
Great guy. It was a swing and a miss. This could be a hit. I want it now.
and Lance, other than our collective, national glee that the Start menu is finally back, thank Christ, and other than the amazing world that HoloLens is opening up to you, kind of what is your overall takeaway? I mean, I know you've got tons of stuff you got to think about. Your mind must be swimming, but what do you think, and what are kind of your final thoughts?
I continue to be impressed by Satya Nadella, his vision for the company, his ability to drive people forward. One of the things, maybe the best example of how things have changed under Satya is the way in which things are being developed more or less out in the open. A lot of the software, they push out builds and they get live telemetry and they work on it. They're trying to make development a conversation. And, Microsoft is a software and a hardware company, but I think that at its heart, it's a software company.
Definitely.
And so the way in which it develops is so critical, and stepping down off what I sometimes consider its high horse from years ago and getting as close as it possibly can to its core customers and really listening and then delivering on their pain points and delivering on their dreams is something that I think they're really doing now. And I just feel like, sometimes you go someplace and you can get a sense of the mood. And I feel like there's both an intensity and an excitement. The last thing I'll say is that in the Q&A after, I noticed that Satya was almost seemed a tiny bit combative. Like, he was really proud of what they had done here, and he wasn't going to take any nonsense. Somebody asked him a question almost right off the bat about, how can you become like as popular as Apple? So my kids want not just an Apple logo on the back of their laptop, but or on their school stuff, but they want to get one for Microsoft. And he was like, that's not what we're doing here. Why do I care about that? What I care about is people wanting what we're doing, being excited about the innovation we're bringing. So he maintains a real focus on all of that, and I think that once again he proved that he's not just driving people forward, he's executing and delivering. And I think that that bodes well for the future of the company. And to sum it up, I am 100% exhausted and have not another word left in me to say. So my goal now is to try and write something spectacular after this hangout.
And I'm sure that it will be spectacular. Godspeed from the Redmond campus, and thank Microsoft for letting you stay there. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this Google Hangout, MashTalk 2015. You can use the hashtag MashTalk to talk to us on social media, on Twitter, Google+, Facebook. Let us know your thoughts. And as I said, we're going to look into maybe having just a HoloLens and Windows holographic focused hangout later in the week, maybe next week, because I think there's a ton of stuff that we could do to talk more about this. But in the meantime, I'm Christina Warren, Mashable Senior Tech Analyst for Pete Patchell, Chris Taylor, and Lance Ulanoff. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Yeah.